At one point in time, Alexander Emelianenko was the most intriguing heavyweight prospect in all of mixed martial arts. He was young, extremely talented, and had a demeanor and a backstory that was subject to more mystique and speculation than Jason Voorhees. But most importantly of all, he was the younger brother of Fedor Emelianenko, who many consider to be the greatest heavyweight fighter of all time, and coming from that stock, Alexander's potential seems sky high. But here we are almost 2 decades later, and most people in North America aren't even aware that he still competes. He's lost fans, family, friends, burned every single bridge, was convicted of some horrific crimes, and physically looks barely recognizable to what he once was. Depending on who you ask and how much you want to believe, he's either a total waste of potential or an irredeemable monster that needs to be locked behind bars for the rest of his life. In this video, we'll explore the full story, starting from where he came from to where he eventually ended up and how, and as the viewer, I'll let you draw your own conclusions about what type of person he is. And Alex's story begins on August 2nd of 1981. He was born in Stary Oskol, a small Soviet city 384 miles south of Moscow with a population of just over 200,000. Alex was the third of 4 children. In addition to Fedor, he also has an older sister named Marina and a younger brother named Ivan. His mother Olga was a teacher and his father Vladimir was a welder, and he was named after his paternal grandfather. Here's an interesting fact: even though both Alex and Fedor identify their nationality as being Russian, their father was actually Ukrainian. Fedor was actually born in Rubizhny, Ukraine, and the last name Emelianenko is most commonly found amongst Ukrainians. It's unclear what nationality their mother was, but at the very least, their family tree is half Ukrainian. The confusion is aided by the fact that back then, both the Ukrainian and Russian territories were identified as the USSR, or the Soviet Union. Everything was under the same government and economy, and there were no real discernible differences in the lifestyles of the people. For the average family, life in the Soviet Union was rough regardless of which part of it you were in. People were poor and food was scarce. When reminiscing about the dietary habits of his childhood, Alex had this to say: "There was nothing to eat at home. We ate just cooked spaghetti with my brother or just potato. In the best case scenario, my mother would make a cabbage soup on some kind of bone for bouillon. She'd make a 9-liter pot for the whole week and we'd eat it until we finished it. And that's how we ate." Obviously, this is a translated quote with some grammatical errors, so if you don't like how I said it, feel free to read it to yourself in a Russian accent. But this style of eating was very common in the Soviet Union. Like I said, times were tough. It was just grains and a couple of vegetables purchased in bulk if you were lucky. And naturally, the scarcity extended to recreational leisure items like toys, games, or anything that would facilitate any kind of entertaining indoor activities. So with his parents constantly being out of the house making ends meet, Alex spent most of his time on the streets. He would run around with his friends, mostly getting into petty trouble, and only stop by at the house to eat or sleep. And through these interactions with other children, early on it became very apparent that Alex had a temperament that was very aggressive and competitive. He would find himself in fights constantly, usually over nothing more than one of his friends pointing to somebody and saying that they were the strongest. And unlike other kids in his age group, Alex was very willing and ready to escalate the violence past the point of just pushing and grappling. He'd use his fists and feet to draw blood or inflict other forms of injury, and this made him a very scary opponent for his peers. And this led him to fighting kids that were older. One of the first fights he remembers was when he was just 6 years old, fighting somebody that was 2 years his senior. At that age, it's a really big difference, and it says a lot that Alex recalls pulverizing the kid. But there was one older kid that he idolized unconditionally, and that was his older brother Fedor. Being 5 years older, Fedor was often tasked with keeping an eye on Alex by his parents, which wasn't hard for him to do as Alex would stick to him like glue at every opportunity. Fedor was already years deep into sambo training at the time and would take Alex with him to practices. At first, he'd just sit there and watch, but quickly began to participate in training sessions as well. And it quickly became apparent that Alex was a very talented athlete. He was big for his age, but also very fast with extremely sharp reflexes. He was hard-headed though and would often get into arguments with his trainers, which led to him bouncing around several different sports. He tried wrestling, judo, and even basketball and soccer, but eventually landed on training just sambo and boxing. The boxing training was done in secret as his mother was completely against it, and he had to keep his training equipment in a mailbox adjacent to his house. As the years went on, Alex began to physically overtake Fedor, becoming taller and bigger. At 6'5" and well over 200 pounds, he grew into a real specimen, which is made even more amazing by the fact that he was literally starving for a good portion of his childhood. Who knows how big he could have been if he had access to good nutrition during his growing years. During his reign as Pride FC heavyweight champion, Fedor himself stated that he believes that Alex was much more physically naturally gifted than he ever was. The one thing Fedor always had over him though was the fact that he was very goal-oriented and regimented even as a kid, and Alex was rebellious and chaotic. That could be the result of Fedor being the oldest and being laced with the most responsibility compared to the other children, or maybe the there's some genetic factors at play, or maybe a combination of both. But regardless of what the actual reason was, it was a fact that Alex led a more tumultuous lifestyle compared to his older brother. And it was amplified by the fact that his coming of age years were spent in 90s Russia, which was in disarray after the fall of the Soviet Union. The economy collapsed and the country became plagued by an influx of criminality. There was an aura of lawlessness, chaos, and disorganization all over the country. Nobody knew what tomorrow would bring. And out of this, a new cultural image for a figure of success emerged that was dubbed the New Russian. Unlike the hard-working and strong principled characters of the Soviet era, the New Russian would take what was his by any means necessary. He was armed, dangerous, rich, and flashy, stereotypically wearing sunglasses, gold chains, and rings and leather jackets, while driving black BMWs or Mercedes, German cars, which were the ultimate taboo in the Soviet Union. And just like all Russian street kids at the time, Alex was likely affected by this image, and it likely inspired his behavior to be less than well-mannered. He began to participate in street fights between neighborhoods, usually consisting of 1,000 people or more. When we went to fight, I remember we had in our city this huge conflict, and we fought one inner-city suburb against another. We gathered something like 1,000 of us, and we fought against their 1,000. We gathered on one huge abandoned building site, picked up sticks, basically anything that came to hand. We overturned cars, sometimes police cars, and that's not normal, you know, it's youth. Basically, one of our friends was hurt by the kids in a neighboring suburb, and then friends of friends and friends of their friends came, and that's how it eventually happened. Many people showed up. The authorities didn't know what to do with us. These types of acts quickly made Alex the black sheep of his family, especially when contrasted with Fedor, who always had a strong moral compass. It's been implied that this caused a rift between him and his father especially. And when Fedor got conscripted to the army at 18, tensions in the house hit a boiling point and his parents got divorced. This put the family into an even worse financial position. Alex, his younger brother, and his older sister were left to live on his mother's teacher's salary. And due to his mother's daily monetary struggles and his dad simply disappearing, neither parent seemed to pay any attention to the family at all. Ironically, this had a positive effect on Alex as he fully immersed himself in training. He became the master of sports in judo at 16 and won the European Sambo Championships at 18. The same year that he became master of sports, he had what he thought was a final conversation with his father, which led to them not talking to one another well into Alex's adult years. I know everything about this person, what he's really like. I don't know. Of course I could put on a mask, make friends, and sit there with a smile saying, "Father, I'm so happy to see you," but really I think it's better not to communicate with such people. Earlier, a few years ago, he used to call to ask about my life, my health, and such, and now he doesn't even call anymore. And when I was 14 or 15 and they separated, my father started thinking of his own stomach and his own life. He stopped helping us, stopped helping my mother. If she spent her teacher's salary just on herself, then my father spent his salary just on himself. Didn't help us at all. Eventually, Alex was able to finish vocational school as an electric welder after being transferred from several other classes for bad behavior, but he chose not to work. Instead, fully embracing the New Russian spirit, he did unspecified odd jobs for his friends, which towed the line of legality. But this didn't pay him nearly enough to live comfortably. He was so poor that he claims he had to share a jacket with Fedor in below freezing temperatures during the brutal Russian winters. And there is a long-standing rumor that around this time, he did some time in prison. The rumor is fueled by the fact that he has jailhouse-style tattoos all over his body, which may signify that he is a member of a Russian prison group called Vory v Zakone, or Thieves in Law when translated to English. The stars on his knees and shoulders, which according to the Thieves in Law protocol signify that he will never kneel before authority. The spider webs on his shoulders symbolizing jail bars. A phrase on his feet that reads, "If you go looking for truth, you'll get erased to your ass." A clumsy direct translation from Russian, obviously, but basically it means that searching for truth will destroy you. And finally, a cathedral on his forearm, which is supposed to signify the amount of times and for how many years he's been jailed, with the domes representing the times and the windows on the domes representing the years. His cathedral has 2 domes with 4 windows, which is supposed to mean that he was jailed twice for a collective period of 4 years, once for 3 years and once for a year. Alex himself denies being in prison and claims that the tattoos are simply a hobby, and I have to lean towards believing that because there's record of him competing every single year that he was supposed to be in jail. And the Thieves in Law are a very exclusive group. Currently, there's thought to be only 442 members in the whole world, so it's very hard to believe that a teenager would earn very high-ranking ink. It's much more likely that he simply liked the style of the tattoos and decided to emulate it. And that's supported by the fact that in 2009, he got the stars on his shoulders covered up with clouds. It's unlikely that a genuine thief in law will cover up just some of his tattoos and not others. You're either fully in or you're fully out. However, there is one thing that might possibly add a little bit of credence to the theory of him being in jail. All Russian males between the ages of 18 and 30 are required by federal law to serve 2 years in the army. And there is no public record of Alex ever serving in the army, even though he's been a Russian citizen all of his life. Makes you think. Alex's late teens and early 20s seem to have been spent competing in combat sambo tournaments alongside Fedor, who by that point had joined the Russian national team. However, he would leave the team due to a lack of money to pursue an at the time relatively niche and controversial sport of mixed martial arts in the year 2000. And by 2003, he would already hold the heavyweight title of the biggest and most prestigious MMA organization at the time, Japanese promotion Pride FC. And just like when they were children, Alex, whose temperament and skill set could only be applied to fighting, followed in Fedor's footsteps and joined the promotion 6 months after Fedor won his title. He won his first 3 fights and immediately became a hit with the fans due to his look, size, and amazing hand speed. He was aloof, stoic, didn't speak much, but dispatched of his opponents in quick and exciting fashion. And unlike Fedor, who had a more balanced and strategy-heavy approach, he seemed to have preferred to stand and trade. And his crisp boxing combinations shined and stood out in a sea of fighters who threw sloppy haymakers. And the fact that he had a murky backstory and was covered in what was perceived to be Russian mafia tattoos only added to the intrigue and the mystery of his character. He was like something straight out of an anime show. The year of his debut, he would also move from Stary Oskol to St. Petersburg to train alongside Fedor at the Red Devil Sports Club. And it was in this city where he'd meet his first wife Olga, who he'd marry in 2004 and have a daughter with in 2007. All in all, his stint in Pride went very well. He won 6-2, winning most of his fights by some type of a stoppage, and only losing to the very top level fighters in Mirko Krokop and Josh Barnett. When Pride FC folded in 2007, Alex was looked at as a very hot prospect, being an extremely talented and exciting and ultra marketable heavyweight fighter, while still being only 26 years old with many competitive years in his future. He was set to make his United States debut on the undercard of Fedor's fight against Tim Sylvia at Affliction Band on July 19th of 2008, but was pulled off the card at the last minute for not being able to meet the licensing standards for the California State Athletic Commission. The rumor circulating at the time was that he had tested positive for hepatitis B, which he denied, but the controversy resurfaced 2 years later when he was slated to fight Polish strongman Mariusz Pudzianowski in Polish promotion KSW. The owner of KSW nixed the fight, publicly stating that Alex had once again tested positive, this time for hepatitis C. This time, in order to clear his name, Alex went as far as producing negative test results through another Polish promotion, Strefa Wok, where he was scheduled to fight Alistair Overeem. It was strongly speculated that the results may have been falsified as they had not been independently verified. And to muddy the waters even further, Overeem ended up pulling out of the fight without stating a specific reason as to why. Other fights would subsequently be scheduled for Strefa Wok, but they would all end up falling through and he would never end up fighting for the organization. There's no consensus on what the truth actually is when it comes to Alex's blood work, but until this day, he has never fought on US soil. In 2012, he would suddenly retire from MMA at the age of 31, citing chronic injuries and lack of time with his family in an open letter to his fans, stating, "Unfortunately, I won't be able to perform in the ring anymore because of health problems caused by old injuries. As an athlete, it's very difficult for me to come to terms with this. I'm grateful to the fans and sponsors for their support and for believing in me. I'm also grateful to my opponents. Your ill will always made me move forward and achieve new results. I understand that I'll now be facing a lot of accusations and criticism which are unrelated to my direct line of work. Unfortunately, there will always be people who want to score points for themselves in any negative situation. I wouldn't make any comments, explain anything, or offer excuses. Every living person does good and bad things. This is what we are. I'm sure that I've made a lot for the sport, attracting many young people in the gyms by my example." But this was not just a case of an athlete being burned out. There were much darker things brewing behind the scenes, and Alex's mask began to slip. Around the time of the hepatitis controversy, he had gotten divorced from his wife and seemingly went wild with his behavior. And it quickly, and for some fans shockingly, became apparent that the once stoic and mysterious fighter was a full-blown raging alcoholic with questionable morals. In 2012, it was reported that he was charged with petty hooliganism and fined 700 rubles for drunken and disorderly behavior on the plane. He lit up a cigarette in his seat, tried to fight passengers, and ignored requests from flight attendants to calm down. Soon, clips of him blackout drunk and slurring his words beyond comprehension began circulating social media.
Жень, ну ты берега попутал. Какие мы же армейцы? Я еду. Не пойдем.
This specific incident once again got him in trouble as it was filmed on the children's playground. Since this behavior coincided with his divorce, some people speculated that it was a catalyst for why he was acting out. The reasons for the divorce have never been stated publicly by Alex or Olga, and the two have maintained a friendly relationship while co-parenting. But Olga's sister commented on the split in 2020 on her YouTube channel, and if she is to be believed, it seems that the behavior wasn't caused by the divorce, but rather the divorce was caused by the behavior. Olga met Sasha. They had such a very bright, passionate, stormy love. It was a very beautiful story, a love story. They instantly gave birth to a child, and everything was fine and wonderful. What happened afterwards and why is Sasha still behaving so strangely? He was madly in love and loves my sister, and at some point Sasha was either a little tired of this, he wanted to take a little walk, and he went for a little walk. And if any other woman reacts to this for a little walk normally, well, you think when somewhere there, danced, walked a little, the main thing is to put on a hat on him, as they say. Then this is just not about Olga. My sister hates such things, and taking him for a little walk ended with the fact that my sister instantly, just with lightning speed, married another person and immediately gave birth to another child from this person. Accordingly, when Sasha came to his senses about what had happened in general, he could not believe it. He tried to crawl on his knees, give some diamonds. His lion's pride in general seemed to blow his head off from what happened. He wanted to return everything, but how to return it, he did not understand. He still, after so many years, cannot come to his senses. I don't know how many years they have passed and how long they're no longer together. They maintain friendly relations. They have a common child. This destructive behavior is some kind of cry for despair, some kind of attempt as if to himself or to attract her attention or somehow to return her, but to do something. Here he does not understand what to do. Therefore, one sequence after another of these hooligan antics follows.
Nobody understands this guy. He doesn't speak English. English is important. If you want to make money, you have to speak some language which everybody understands.
Now her channel is some kind of a pseudo-psychological energy rock crystal type of thing. So naturally this is dramatized to the millionth degree and a lot has been lost in translation as well. But we do get some nuggets of information in there that seem to point to what went down. By the way, Sasha and Olga are softened versions of the names Alexander and Olga. I know, it's funny. Sasha's a stripper name. Everybody knows that. Basically, when she talks about going for a walk, that likely refers to partying and cheating. In 2013, things got much darker as he was accused of rape by a 23-year-old woman. When the police were called to the scene by the accuser, they found and detained a clearly intoxicated Emelianenko. However, the accusation was withdrawn soon after, with Alex claiming that the girl was an escort that he had ordered for his birthday. But the incidents kept piling up. Later that year, he was arrested for an assault in a restaurant against a man in his 60s that was celebrating his birthday. Witnesses claimed that the once again obviously intoxicated Emelianenko became annoyed with the volume of the celebration at the neighboring table. He confronted and attacked the man but had to quickly backpedal as other patrons started throwing chairs at him to get him to stop. The case was eventually dropped due to a private reconciliation between both parties. But the following year, things got bad. Real bad, and this is the incident that has loomed over Alex Emelianenko over the past decade. And if it's to be believed that it went down exactly the way it was laid out in the media, then there is really no going back from that. He's truly irredeemable as a person. In 2014, he was detained for an alleged of a woman that was hired to clean his apartment, Polina Stepanova. In addition to the it was alleged that he forbade her from leaving, threatened her into taking unknown drugs, and stole her passport. And the pictures from the court proceedings where he's sitting in the plexiglass box because he's considered to be dangerous to the public make him look like an absolute maniac. He looks like an old witch. Very creepy. In 2015, he was found guilty and sentenced to 4.5 years in a working colony, but he received parole after only serving 18 months. And according to Russian media outlets, he received preferential treatment while inside, having access to training equipment, extra visitation rights, and not having to do any labor, which was mandatory for everybody else at the colony. Upon his release in 2016, he signed a contract with Akhmat Fight Club, the private organization of controversial Chechnyan leader Ramzan Kadyrov, likely because nobody else would touch him. Besides being accused of countless assassinations and human rights violations, Kadyrov was also known for controversial MMA concepts like pitting children below the age of 10 against one another. And in some cases, the children would receive serious injuries, even knockouts. Fedor publicly criticized Kadyrov for this in the media, and allegedly in response, his 16-year-old daughter was attacked and hospitalized in Moscow. And it's been speculated that this event was the final straw that broke the relationship between him and Alex because Alex stood by and never criticized Kadyrov during the attack. And to make matters even worse, Alex would give an interview claiming that he hasn't spoken to Fedor in over 10 years due to people he called psychophants, or in layman's terms, people that were telling Fedor what he wanted to hear in order to suck up to him. Fedor would uncharacteristically and quickly issue a public reply referring to Alex as Judas. Usually, I don't comment on other people's statements, but I cannot remain silent. This is my first and last answer to you. I consider it beneath my dignity to constantly react to your lies. And now the most important thing, why I decided to make this open appeal to you. You called my relatives psychophants. Psychophant, that's you, Judas. I feel sorry that people who were close to you and supported you in hard moments are now suffering. I personally have apologized for you to dozens of people. You can say what you like about me, I'll endure it, but do not dare insult those close to me. Besides, you don't even know them, and all those whom you know helped you and played an important role in your life, and you are not worth their little finger, therefore you are not in my circle. In one of your interviews you said that you can help me, but I do not understand how you, someone who was released from prison not long ago and is known for constant violations of his training regime, can help me. I can only think of one thing, not to dishonor the family name of me and my parents. This was written in 2017, and Alex's relationship with Fedor hasn't been mended since. But while the public perception of him as a person was damaged irreparably, 2017 was also the year where he somewhat got himself together physically. He went on a brief retreat to a Greek monastery where he was placed on a regimented schedule that involved waking up at 5 to pray, chop wood, hold rocks, and bake bread. In interviews, he would take responsibility for his previous alcohol issues and claim that he was now changed and reborn. And when asked if alcohol is still a temptation, he gave a surprisingly self-aware answer. The temptations are still there. They're close and continue to overcome, but I suffer and endure. In post-monastery, Ahmad clubs seemed to have gotten him into unbelievable shape. He now had a pumped-up physique with visible muscle striations, vascularity, and abdominal muscles, something that he didn't even have in the prime of his career. Of course, there's a very good chance that this physique was chemically assisted, as that's kind of the trademark for Ahmad fighters, but regardless, he once again began to perform as a top-level heavyweight fighter. He went on a 5-fight winning streak, all within a period of less than a year, even beating former UFC heavyweight title contender Gabriel Gonzaga by TKO. But this would be his last hurrah, the final time where he looked like a legitimate fighter, as he go back to his old ways very quickly. In 2019, he was again detained and charged with a DUI after ramming his gold Mercedes into 2 cars. As filmed by a police officer at the scene, he was completely uncooperative and belligerent with authorities.
И ты вот снимаешь меня вот на этом, и гордишься тем, что ты, блядь, поинтересовался, что я тебя... Слушай, кусок пропидора.
And you thought John Jones was bad. The gold Mercedes was rumored to have been given to him as a gift by Ramzan Kadyrov for staying sober for a year. It was also rumored to have been promptly taken back. This period was also when Alex began to participate in very low-level freak show influencer fights. He started with boxing Russian strongman and internet personality Mikhail Koklyaev. And while he easily knocked the overmatched Koklyaev out, it was notable to see that he himself was also in horrible shape, not anywhere near the condition that he was in just a couple of years prior. It was very evident that he hasn't been training in a while, and Koklyaev later revealed that the fight was partially staged, with Alex being asked to carry him for several rounds. In 2020, he was once again detained for brawling at a sports recreation center. By this point, his abilities as a fighter began to dip significantly. He was scheduled to fight Magomed Ismailov at ACA 107, a fighter that he was both significantly larger than and had a big experience advantage over. Leading up to the fight, he mocked Ismailov for his size and bizarrely for his bald head, seemingly oblivious to his own issues with male pattern baldness. On the night of the event, the 5'9" middleweight Ismailov pulverized him to a TKO in round 3. He was officially a shell of his former self, and at this point fans also began to notice that he would periodically disappear and reappear in the public eye, which seemed to be related to intense alcoholic benders. He looked so bad in some of these appearances that people began to speculate that he had a stroke. His eyes looked like they sunk back into his his eye sockets, he was slurring his words, and moved like he was suffering from neuropathy. Meanwhile, his manager Azamat Bostanov would appear in media outlets claiming that everything was going great and that they had many exciting new things planned. But all of the fights scheduled for him now seemed to be against influencers like Russian rapper Zhagan, and in the rare occasion that he was scheduled against anyone with any serious training, he got dispatched with ease. He also began to change his look, dyeing his hair and beard white, which combined with the state of his body made him look like he was 70 years old. And he was caught by a fan drunkenly stumbling around the streets in his full old man getup, which he claimed was just him being tired from practice. This is doubtful, of course, since he was also almost arrested for urinating in the middle of an airport lobby. Luckily for him, the officers that arrived on scene were fans and decided to just take pictures with him instead. He also began to pump out short-form TikTok-like content, which whatever fans he had left at that point found to be extremely off-putting. But that might have been the idea of his manager, who tried his very best to keep Alex relevant, but in an ultimate twist of irony ended up going to jail himself for rape and physical assault of his roommate. The absolute final nail in Alex's coffin as a competitor came when he lost by a 13-second knockout to Vyacheslav Datsik in 2022. Datsik, who had an array of issues, was once looked at as an absolute joke compared to the serious fighter that was Alexander Emelianenko. In fact, during a string of particularly bad public behavior a decade prior, Datsik was threatened by Emelianenko on camera, something that was received very well by the fans. But in 2022, Datsik had gotten his life somewhat in order and looked like a proper gentleman juxtaposed against the absolute mess that was Alex. It was the ultimate proof of how funny life can be at times, as the two had completely changed roles. And after the loss, Alex didn't do himself any favors by claiming that the only reason that he lost was because he was chasing Datsik, who was apparently running from him the whole fight. Once again, I just want to remind you that this was a 13-second knockout. These days, Alex is once again claiming to be rehabbing from alcohol, a notion that most fans simply roll their eyes at. He styled his hair and beard in a way that's suggesting he may have converted to Islam, and even appeared on camera implying that his new name may be Abu Bakr. In response to this news, some began to jokingly refer to him as Abu Bakal and Abu Bukhal, a play on the Russian words for drinking and shot glass. Confusingly, he's still also referring to himself as a Christian. Besides that, he's on his third marriage to his second wife and has been making the rounds trying to apologize to Fedor, even offering his sobriety as a gift for Fedor's birthday. But the last time Fedor spoke about him was in 2019 before his fight with Fat Rampage Jackson, and he said that as of that moment, Alex was dead to him. Most recently, an April 2024 rematch against Datsik was cancelled due to fear of an attack after what happened in Crocus City Hall. This might have been a blessing in disguise, as he looks completely out of shape and uncommitted to the task at hand. I want to thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it and it answered some of your questions, especially if at one point you followed Alex and were wondering what happened to him. Unfortunately, his story does not paint him in the best light, and like I said in the beginning of the video, depending on how much you want to believe, he's either a huge waste of potential or an absolute monster. Draw your own conclusions.
Of a paperback book of love, it was so genuine and real as it came pouring out of me. I didn't realize I was singing promises I couldn't